Hey guys, in today's video I'll be doing another tropical update, and on top of Tropical Storm Eta, Eta is still going on and is now starting to impact Florida, especially South Florida, and will continue to impact Florida going through really all of this week still. There's also two new disturbances that the National Hurricane Center is watching. There's one in the Caribbean again that the models really are picking up on, especially the Gfs model that I've seen. And now there's also a potential for somewhat of a maybe tropical or subtropical type of tropical system to form in the eastern central Atlantic, in the open Atlantic there, in the eastern Atlantic around the Azores. That's given a 10 to 30% chance of development by the National Hurricane Center over the next 2 to 5 days. And well, yeah, it's November 8th, for those of you who may not be keeping track of time, since 2020 seems to be both the longest and shortest year ever, especially the longest year ever. It's November, it's early November, and it's crazy that we're seeing this much of activity still that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring, honestly. And because of that, for the fun of it, I pulled up these two recent memes that are two of the greatest memes. Well, especially this one. The other one's not really a meme, but still very fun. So here we go. Come on. There.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So yeah, that's fun because it's 2020, and that's pretty much what we're all screaming internally. And then of course, this one is from one of the most famous scenes from Tommy Wiseau's The Room, which I think perfectly encapsulates just how, especially us weather people, are feeling with the hurricane season going on, and just like everything with the weather going on during this time. So here it is.
You're lying. I never hit you. You are tearing me apart, Lisa.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was fun. Just wanted to put that in there, those two things in there, because just seemed fun to do. In any case, yeah, so we have these two new disturbances in the Atlantic that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring, that we really have to monitor moving into this upcoming week to see whether or not we'll get a couple more named storms out of these. But let's zoom in onto Eta and see how the storm is looking to progress moving forward from today going into this upcoming week. So there is still tropical storm watches up for western Cuba, tropical storm warnings up for the northern Bahamas, same areas that Dorian really devastatingly hit last year. And then there are hurricane warnings in effect for the Keys, because as Eta starts to curve more directly west, it will curve more directly west as it's pretty much going directly over the Keys. And it does look like it could attain hurricane status again going into tomorrow. And then there is hurricane watches up for both the southwest, southeast coast, including Miami and Naples, and then tropical storm warnings in effect for both those same areas, and as well extending up farther the east coast up towards Melbourne. And then there's also a tropical storm watch in effect as well for the central west coast of Florida near Tampa. Now, the National Hurricane Center is forecasting Eta to regain hurricane status, but is only forecasting it to remain at a 75-mile-per-hour Cat 1 once it potentially does get to hurricane status going into early tomorrow afternoon, through about overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning, and then it will start to weaken again as it's starting to curve back towards directly north over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, heading back towards Florida and hitting the northern part of Florida towards the Florida Panhandle. And then, I don't know, we'll see what it does after that. It will likely finally weaken and finally be fully history after we get towards the end of the week, this upcoming week, getting towards this upcoming weekend. So that is the current cone forecast from the National Hurricane Center. And now let's look at the rainfall forecast, and you can see, especially for central, southern Florida and southeast Florida, they're expecting rainfall totals of up towards 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. That could cause some moderate flooding in a lot of areas, especially outside of Miami, especially since outside of Miami, especially as you move farther towards the west coast, that's a lot of swamp areas, so that could those areas could definitely experience flooding. And even the Keys could see widespread, generally up towards 4 to 6 inches, and then more of the eastern Keys could see between 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. So this is going to be as well a pretty huge rainmaker for southern Florida, and Naples you could see generally 4 to 6 inches of rainfall. So that's also potentially going to cause some chances of flooding in those areas as well. And speaking of flooding risk, here's the flash flooding potential. And you can see the highest chance of flash flooding potential is along that southeast coast, going from Miami up towards West Palm Beach, where they have a moderate chance of flash flooding. That's a 20% chance of flash flooding, and then the yellows is a 10% slight risk of flash flooding, and then the greens extending all the way up towards almost near Jacksonville on the east coast of Florida is a 5% marginal risk of flash flooding. So, yeah, we've got a pretty decent shot at flash flooding, especially for the South Florida regions of Naples and Miami up towards West Palm Beach. Now let's look at the storm surge potential here. And you can see there's storm surge warning in effect for all of the Keys, and a storm surge watch in effect for those very southern parts of Florida up towards south and west coast of Florida up towards Naples. So those areas could experience some storm surge and potentially some storm surge flooding. There is forecast now for a general 2 to 4 feet for the Keys up towards Naples, and 2 to 3 feet of storm surge extending from around Miami up towards West Palm Beach, and then 1 to 2 feet of storm surge, potential for storm surge, 1 to 2 feet of storm surge extending all the way up the rest of the east coast of Florida from West Palm Beach towards what is that? Towards parts of the southern Georgia coast. So yeah, there'll probably be some overwash on the road, especially for the Keys. The US 1 for those regions will likely could see some overwash from the water getting pushed over those areas. And then as well for southwestern Florida and those parts of Florida, since it's all swamp, likely could see some added on chances of some flooding because of this chance of storm surge. Now, here's the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities. You can see generally up to 100% chance for the Keys, southern Florida, including Miami, Naples, and generally a pretty high risk of upwards of 40% chance, 40-50% chance of tropical storm force winds extending all the way up towards Lake Okeechobee, West Palm Beach, and those areas. And then the hurricane wind speed probabilities, it's much lower, but generally highest chances for the central and western Keys up from going towards Key West up towards up towards a 20% chance of hurricane wind speeds. So we'll have to see how quickly between now and tomorrow Eta intensifies. See if maybe it gets to hurricane status again quicker than potentially forecast as of right now, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Here's the arrival time for tropical storm force winds. It's already arrived there for southern Florida, especially southeast Florida, Miami. A good portion of the Keys is already experiencing tropical storm force wind conditions, but you can see getting towards later this evening, towards 8 p.m., it's already overtaken Naples and pretty much all of the southeastern coast of Florida. And then moving overnight tonight, we'll start to move farther north, and tropical storm force winds will be felt all the way up towards pretty much all the southern half of Florida. And then as we get towards into early this week, Monday, Tuesday, the rest of the northern half of Florida will continue to see tropical storm force winds. Yeah, pretty much the entire state of Florida will see tropical storm force conditions from the storm, which is pretty crazy, to say the least. So that's a look at what generally the National Hurricane Center is looking at with Eta. Now, going to tropical tidbits, let's look at what Eta's looking at, with satellite imagery. A very large and not exactly the best formed system. It's kind of surprising, honestly. That's a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. But yeah, I mean, you can see it has some pretty heavy convection bands to the north of that center here that look to move in towards South Florida and Miami. So those regions will continue to see some pretty heavy downpours of rain and pretty strong bursts of wind going through really the rest of today, of course, into through all of tomorrow for sure, and going even into probably a good portion of Tuesday. So that's very interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Now, let's see what the hurricane models are showing. So here's the hurricane model track guidance. You can see they are all in great agreement. We'll continue towards the west generally from this point forward in towards the southern southeastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and then curve pretty sharply north, and then go back in towards the west coast of Florida, potentially just north of Tampa, but we'll have to see. Maybe it could, but we'll have to see what fluctuations, what other more fluctuations it'll have, because it could potentially even curve directly north and go right over Tampa. That would be interesting, because not that many tropical systems have actually ever really gone directly over Tampa, Florida, which is kind of surprising probably to a good amount of us. But it also could go over Florida, the west coast of Florida, a bit farther north, closer towards Mexico Beach, is where directly Hurricane Michael in 2018 went right over, totally decimated that whole area. So we'll really have to see. But it's interesting. Here's something very interesting that I immediately questioned as I just saw this just a few seconds ago with the current 18Z run of the model intensity guidance for Eta. Majority of models showing a pretty likely outlook, pretty humane outlook, you could say, showing the storm generally holding steady with its intensity, and potentially even getting back towards Category 1 status as we get towards around 2 days from now or so. Potentially even getting towards Category 1 status, again towards 24 hours from now even, 24, 36 hours from now even. And then there are a few that really shoot it up in intensity, bringing it into Category 2, Category 3, even one all the way up back to Category 4 status. So, very interesting. That we'll have to see. That's the Cody model, I believe, that's showing that. That's very interesting. That some models are showing potentially could get back up towards that major hurricane status. So, well, we'll have to see. Most likely will not happen. I want to say that right now. It definitely most likely will not happen, but I don't know. There's always a chance, of course. So we'll have to see. Once again, there's a NOAA. There's a NOAA recon plane in Eta currently that is finding up towards that, actually, in fact, up towards that hurricane force wind speeds between 64 to 83 knots, and it's finding a pressure of around 993, 994 millibars, so its pressure staying still around the same that it has been lately. Here, let's look here. Okay, so they have found flight level winds of up towards that 70 knots, so that's interesting. Here's the surface wind that's currently only being shown as only up towards between 50 to 55 knots. That's kind of weird, but all right. We'll have to see though. Getting towards the 7 p.m. Advisory later. We'll see if it potentially is strengthened maybe towards 70 miles per hour at the least. So we'll have to see. But that's very interesting. So now let's look at the models. Show you. Let's show you the Southeast U.S. There we go. Here's the GFS model, and let's show you Eta. Moving over, the GFS model is interesting, showing definitely lots of heavy rain as Eta continues to move towards the north and west, and even potentially going over the very eastern portion of the Keys, or maybe going over the very southern part of mainland Florida, and then moving into the Gulf, and then curving northward. Being still shown as a pretty decently formed system, but then showing it just hanging out and dying off there in the Gulf, and not really continuing to move towards the north, back towards into Florida there on the west coast. So that's very interesting. Now let's show you the CMC model. CMC model is showing generally the same exact thing in the beginning here with the GFS was showing with Eta moving over the Keys and potentially very, very southern mainland Florida, and then showing it curving back towards the north and still being a pretty well-rounded system, pretty strong system, but then again falling apart right as it's approaching again the northwest coast of Florida there, around Tampa, or maybe just north of Tampa there. So Interesting outlook from the CMC. Here's the European model. Let's go to vorticity, and there's the European model showing a very strong vorticity for the system as it even moves farther north in the Eastern Gulf and then pretty much looks very near Mexico Beach and then curving out into the East Coast and becoming a remnant low as it starts to move out off the East Coast and into the Northern Atlantic. So that's interesting. Very interesting what the European model is showing as well. Now let's show you what the icon model is showing, because that's very interesting. Because this is the last model. I'll show you what the models are showing for Eta, and you can see the icon model showing generally the same thing that the CMC and GFS model are showing, and then starting to curve back towards north, becoming a very weak system, and also showing it dying out over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So. Interesting outlook there by the icon. Now I want to go back to the GFS model, and I only want to show you the GFS model with this. Well, maybe not. I first want to show you the potential of that more eastern Atlantic potential tropical cyclone there, south of the Azores. You can see there it is right there. And it starts to form somewhat of a decent low pressure center, as you can see, and becomes a decently strong low pressure center as it starts to weaken though and become a remnant low as its remnant moisture heads back in towards Portugal and the Iberian Peninsula. So that's very interesting. So that's what the GFS is showing for the potential of that subtropical or tropical system in the eastern Atlantic. So that's interesting. Now let's go to zoom back down into the Caribbean to show you what the GFS is showing for the potential of that Caribbean disturbance that the NHC is currently watching now. And you can see there's that low pressure center forming, and like kind of what Eta did in this general same exact area, really rapidly intensifies and becomes a pretty strong system. It looks to be maybe like a Cat 3 or 4 maybe, weak Cat 4 storm, and then hitting Belize and the Yucatan, and then dying out over that northern part of Central America into Mexico, southern Mexico. So that's very interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. GFS showing definitely a strong signal for this system, and that's most likely part of the reason why the National Hurricane Center has started monitoring this system. And I'll show you what the CMC model is showing for that system. Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, moving forward here, you can see there's that precipitation, low pressure center. Shows a much farther south and hitting more or less the same general exact region that Eta hit in Central America, in that coast of Nicaragua, and also showing it strengthening a lot more right as it's making landfall and bringing, again, heavy rain there for those regions. So that's interesting. So the models generally still do show that potential of that system. So yeah, we'll have to really keep an eye on that. Now let's look at the 2020 Atlantic Hurricane Season Wikipedia page, and this has been, again, a very record-breaking, insane, hyperactive hurricane season. This is now another hyperactive hurricane season. Of course, definitely is one with the amount of tropical cyclones we've seen form this season in the Atlantic. 29 total depressions, 28 total named storms is now a record high, tied with 2005. 12 total hurricanes and 5 total major hurricanes. Total fatalities so far this season really skyrocketed with how much damage and how deadly Eta was in Central America. Now the total fatalities for this year's hurricane season is now all the way up to 388, and the total damage is now at above above $32.783 billion in damage. So again, that's become a pretty damaging season. Eta has lasted for a decent amount of time, since the very end of October through now the 8th of November. So it looks to generally still be a thing all throughout this week, and likely won't die off till towards maybe the very end of this upcoming week or into the very early portion of next week. So that's quite interesting. I'm not sure why the ACE value hasn't really gone up or anything. It's at 153.80 units currently, so that is now officially entered that zone of officially calling an Atlantic hurricane season a hyperactive Atlantic hurricane season, you need at least 145 units of ACE to declare an Atlantic hurricane season a hyperactive Atlantic hurricane season. So we've gone through that benchmark, another huge benchmark there. And again, Eta was a very extremely insane, very late season major hurricane formed on Halloween, and still active now, of course, obviously, and has killed at least 229 people. Damage is still unknown. And the biggest area that it impacted, of course, was Central America, especially Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, Guatemala. So brought insane amounts of rainfall. Some areas picked up, again, like forecast, upwards of 2 inches of rainfall, potentially all the way up towards 40 inches, I think, in some spots. So that's insane. Category 4 hurricane, 150 miles per hour at peak intensity, 923 millibars. Again, I truly still stand by, and I really strongly think that on post-analysis for this season and looking back at this storm by the WMO, they will up Eta to being a 160 mile per hour Cat 5 with keeping the pressure the same, because definitely by the way it looked and everything that was presented with it, it definitely seemed like it was at least a weak Cat 5 at peak intensity, right as it was slowly approaching Nicaragua before it made landfall. So again, I really think on post-analysis, Eta will become a Category 5 hurricane. So yeah. I don't know if you guys agree with me there, but yeah, that's my thinking on that. But with the two new disturbances that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring, we'll have to see if we potentially get Theta and Iota out of both the systems, or maybe only one name out of these two new disturbances. So we'll have to see, but the potential is high that we'll see potentially at least one of these next two names of Theta and Iota. Most likely, I think, will go towards that Caribbean system. But again, we'll have to see if that potentially subtropical system, likely will be subtropical, in the Eastern Atlantic, will form into a subtropical name system. So we'll have to see if that does pan out. Alright, so that's it for today's video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this update on Eta and what it is doing in South Florida, and what it is, how it is affecting the U.S., especially, of course, just Florida. If you did enjoy this video, found it informative, please consider liking the video, commenting on the video. If you're a first-time viewer and you liked what you saw in today's video, if you like tropical content, I do tons of that kind of content on my channel, so please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.